Scallan.
What's up, brother? How are you?
I'm doing great. Varsity Talks. Man, I got to tell you, how does God work? And I think through this, earlier this week, I saw Sharb for the first time in
Yeah.
15 years.
Looks exactly the same, right?
It's kind of scary a little bit.
Yeah, right?
The man hasn't aged.
Yeah.
He's always looked that old.
Yeah. I know if y'all don't know, Ray Charbonneau was our wrestling coach and Louisiana Hall of Famer. And he actually, we actually did a tournament at Holy Cross, and my mom reached out to him and said, my mom gives him money for like close up to like sponsor kids to go to like Washington, D.C. and stuff.
Yeah.
So they basically like, hey, come see Eric's kid, come wrestle. But yeah, and that was the first time he's been to a wrestling tournament in, I think like 10 or 15 years or something like that. Yeah, because I guess you do you're a coach for so long and then you're done with it. It's kind of like, you're done.
Get away from it.
Yeah, get away from it, So no, it was cool. And I think it was awesome to see, it's just weird. Like the mentors you have in your life, this is the guy you look up to, a guy that, when I was going through like high school, getting in trouble, like I actually lived with him for a little bit, and he kind of obviously mentored me, and then just to see, I basically became that almost. I basically became Ray Charbonneau. Even though like the way I yell at kids, like it's very Charbonneau-ish. But I've actually gotten away from all that, my style of coaching. Now I just death stare kids. I don't like that piercing yelling voice. It just, and I'm kind of over it now. Now it's just I just look at them
like better.
Yeah, right. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. And it crushes them. It's way worse.
It is way worse. The thought that you can pin a guy in like 30 seconds and you're in your senior year and your coach looks at you and says, "Where's that been?" Like not satisfied at all.
Yeah.
Just frustrated that you didn't do that over and over again. It's like, man.
Yeah, right. Just couldn't make them happy, right? And everyone has different styles of coaching, and some of that style of coaching works for a lot of kids, and for some people it doesn't.
Yeah.
And you see that in wrestling all the time, or some kids. We have how many great athletes did we have come through our room? Dude, they phased out is because they couldn't take the criticism, And so I think a good coach, and I know me personally, like I feel like I know how to coach certain kids a certain way. Some kids I can really get on them real hard. Some kids I got to be, the thing is when someone comes off a wrestling mat, man, they are just exhausted, right? Like what they're going through, and the last thing they need to hear is just you critiquing them or coming after them, give them their moment. And I still feel like my son, he had a couple hard matches that he lost, and my ex-wife, we co-parent very well, and she tries to get on like, hey, it's okay. I was like, man, just give him his moment. Because anything you say right then and there, they're not going to listen to anyway.
No.
So
it's kind of like people don't remember what you say to them; they remember how you make them feel.
Yeah, right.
But I will say this about Sharp, because I want to hear more about your coaching style and how you adapt for each child. That man, I've actually made a post about it. I don't know if you saw that. It was like, that man taught me in many ways that level of discipline. And I think children, because you're a coach, want that discipline. Internally, everybody wants a path.
Yeah.
And they want clarity.
Yeah, right.
And Sharp is a leader, dude. And he changed my whole life. And I know he changed your life. So just to kind of take a step back, went to Holy Cross together.
Right.
We're on the wrestling team together for years and years and years. We disconnect, and now we sit here. You got a fight coming up.
Yeah.
You told me earlier you're 39 years old.
Yeah, 39, man. Yeah.
About to step back into a cage.
Yeah.
Also run a very successful MMA gym. You've had big names come through that gym, right?
Right. And so, we had, I trained under Tim Crater, which is Louisiana's very first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He basically went to California, was the first guy from Louisiana, learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and really brought it back to Louisiana.
Beautiful.
Me and Dustin Poirier, I've been riding Poirier's coattails for as long as I can remember, but me and Poirier, we actually walked in as amateurs together in this little rinky-dink, martial arts studio. They had carpet on the ground. The mat wasn't like it was like a mat that like absolutely absorbed all the sweat. So
That's disgusting.
So you couldn't.
That's so gross.
I swear, God,
That's so gross.
You couldn't mop it or anything. We just let it dry, and they had like just pieces of like wood like on the floor and stuff, and so we would spar and you just get like blisters all over.
Sounds like one big ringworm.
Yeah, it was. But Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to train with him, and then Aaron Phillips. He owns a giant martial arts gym in Lafayette as well, and he's fought in the UFC. And yeah, I guess throughout my training career, you make friends with these guys. It's something about people that you train with and compete against. I mean, there's a certain intimacy. Like when you're sweating on each other. I mean, you're trying to kill each other. There's a bond that's formed.
Yeah.
And so I think we've. Yeah, I've got the privilege to kind of train with some of the best guys. I've never really had a desire to be like a world champion. Like that never was like my thing. But I always just want to kind of be part of and train with some of the best guys. And so that was always kind of like my goal.
So we got to talk about this progression, because you said something just now that I think you and I can have to discuss. I'm actually happy Dickie's not here, because Dickie would have went off on a tangent. He wanted me to ask you about this fist fight y'all got in with some other guys, and then the time that he beat you in wrestling, which we all know was fake. He was going to make a big joke out of it. But you and I did have, see, I can only imagine when you take it a step further, because really wrestling is controlled aggression. MMA is even more aggression, even more controlled. Yeah. And we had a bond because we were in the trenches as young, like adults growing up. Yeah. But then you take a step further. So tell me a little bit about.
And I would say, we were like, just what I remember the most about like our relationship and a friendship is that, riding in the van together to these long tournaments, the weigh-ins. I remember one time, so Ray Charbonneau's story is that he's going off on us. If you remember, like we would have actually played, our team would have got like a third place trophy at this one tournament. And then my brother, he didn't make, like he missed the weigh-ins, right? He missed the weigh-ins for something, and he couldn't get there on time. And basically, if he would have showed up, then we basically would have won. But before that, we had like 5 guys get in the finals, and I think like everybody lost. And I remember Charbonneau was just going off on us, right? He's so mad because man, we were finally about to get like a team trophy, right? And Paul just started singing, "I'm proud to be an American," and dude, he just freaking lost. You don't remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I could just imagine, but, I would say my transition, I'll talk about this briefly. I was competitive in high school, and me and Charbonneau had this moment where I lost in the state finals, lost to a guy that I beat 4 times that year. Yeah. Right. And so I lose that match. We go in the back, and I remember, Coach Charbonneau, instead of like, coddling me, he said, "I told you to go for 1, right? Because I went for the reversal instead of stand up, right?" And I remember just like kind of like cursing at him, like I told him off, in this back room. Meanwhile, my brothers and my dad, they're trying to get in the back. They're fighting with security and all this stuff. So I'm sitting there, and I remember I start crying, right? I'm like curl up in a ball. I'm like my hopes and dreams are all crushed, right? At the time,
Sure.
And I remember Charbonneau says, like, "You think you got it bad right now?" He goes, "I had a wife that left me." He goes, I had a all-star team that was taken away from me." He said, "Eric, this is the defining moment in your life. You're going to get up right now. You're going to go hug your opponent. You're going to go, you're going to go thank your mom and your dad for being there, and you're going to get up and you're going to recover from this." And sure enough, I did, man. I saw my opponent, I shook his hand and said, "Hey, a great match," and eventually, along with my wrestling career, I didn't live to my full potential. I was partying. I kind of continued to do what I was doing. But I always say what led to a successful MMA career was I had a chip on my shoulder. You know what I'm saying? Like I was so that state finals match, getting kicked out of this college, leaving this college, So then when I made that transition to MMA. I was sitting there, I was watching television. I was like, and I saw the fights on television. I was like, man, I can do this stuff, But all the painful moments were just fuel. And I always was. I was a guy that had a chip on his shoulder. I was always pissed off. I'm sure you listen like David Goggins a lot, right? And so he talks about cookies in a jar, right? So cookies in a jar is where you take up past failures, past successful stories, and you dig into that as fuel. And man, I had a lot. So I always say if it wasn't for those losses, and then I guess this is the way you kind of have to look at it, right? But if it wasn't for those losses, I wouldn't have the wins that I had. How many come from behind wrestling matches did I have, right? I remember, what is it? think it was my sophomore year, junior year. I remember wrestled Jesuit, right? And we didn't beat him, but I mean, I think I upsetted some guy, like I think it's Gretzky or some guy I wasn't supposed to beat, right? And I upset him. I think you got a pin. Ben Borlon got a pin, you know. And I remember that happening and just, you know, just feeling on top of the world, you know. But yeah. So anyway, so all that stuff kind of led to some of my success. And man, I've had a lot of comeback from behind victories in MMA and stuff, and it's just because I'm able to never going to let that happen again. You know, and a lot of that has transferred it like into my life and whatnot. So,
Bro, you're bringing up so many things that I have done. I've put deep down.
I'm sure like football career stuff. Like,
What do you remember?
your
My
injury,
senior year.
yeah. I remember you had an injury, right? And I think
Remember we had Lehigh. Remember leading up to Lehigh.
I forget exactly.
Leading up to Lehigh, it was like he put me at heavyweight. Everybody's getting pinned. I'm pinning people. These kids are big. You know, most of these kids are just, you know,
Yeah.
they throw them out there because they get the offensive lineman or the defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't about me.
No, it certainly is.
But I remember going to Sharp, and this just shows, it speaks to who the man is. I was in tears. My senior year was a lot of things you shouldn't do, right? Yeah. And you know, you blame a lot of things in your life, but I remember football not getting all district, and like you said,
that was a big thing for you. Yeah.
Feeling crushed, like how did that happen? Because junior year was going so well, and then senior year was a train wreck. And I remember looking at Sharp, I said, whatever it takes, I want to be a state champion.
Yeah.
And he knew at that point we were serious, so he said, I'm going to put you at heavyweight. I'm 225 pounds, wrestling heavyweight. You remember that?
Yeah, I should have done that.
You should have done that.
Should have done that.
You should have. I mean, I even cut to 215, but, you know, leading up to Lehigh, I was the second seed Lehigh.
Yeah.
Only kid that wasn't ranked higher was a kid that I never wrestled.
Yeah.
And do you remember that match? Did you watch that match when I got slammed?
I remember you had a shoulder injury.
The shoulder blew out the front.
The shoulder injury, and that was. If I remember you finished strong. I remember just in the state, like you finishing strong, you know, or you having that shoulder injury and like fight. Like I remember just seeing like just the pain and grimace, you know, and it was just. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, you look back like, oh, it's just high school sports. It's like, well, no, to us that was our world, you know. And one thing I've learned is that, man, you know, one match, one football game doesn't define who you are as a person. But it's funny how some of those things that you'll carry more.
It'll shape you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that's what sports are for, right? Sports is supposed to. It's a metaphor for life. You know, hopefully every sport has their own lesson and different rule set that builds, you know, certain character. You know, how to work with others, how to be accountable, how to have perseverance, and that's the whole point of it. Is that okay? Well, would you learn from the game? Did you take that lesson and did you bring it over into your family life?
Yes.
You know, did you bring it over? That. Did you bring it over into your business? You know, and that's what it's really about, man. You know, like how do you measure success? How many people you know have been successful athletes but are just dirtballs? You know, I mean,
a lot.
And it happens a lot. You know, and you know.
Well, tell me a little bit about this. So, okay, so I bring that up because I'm thinking about how that experience. You know, you go and you go to the pit, right? I think. My kids got the enthusiasm about wrestling. You know, we went to St. Paul's. I brought them.
Yeah.
Now the
great team.
Now the Holy Cross wrestling coach, the guy that just got the head coaching job, was the guy that I was coach. I was his assistant coach for a little bit, helping him on the mat and just getting my boys into it. And then the NCAA championship happens, and then the heavyweight. You saw that whole thing.
Oh, yeah,
that was like they saw me yelling at the TV, like, "Dave, why are you so excited?" I said, "You guys don't understand what it takes." For that to happen the way it just happened.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that pit for a minute. So we'll progress a little bit. So you go from high school, you had you got upset, right? And you were an exceptional high school wrestler. Sure. We just go on, I'm saying it, not you. Now, looking back, the reason why I kind of melded my story in is because we were all probably doing things we shouldn't have been doing. That was the bad influences in New Orleans. When you take that pass, you went and wrestled in college.
Right.
Where'd you end up going?
I went to a school called Dana College in Nebraska, and they actually had some high-level guy. I mean, I was actually on the same wrestling team as Benson Henderson, who was actually a world champion, UFC fighter. They had other guys, Leister Bolin, who ended up coaching like Shane Carwin. So it was a small NAIA school, but man, I was in the room with some really good guys, and then I left there. And then went to Wartburg College, Wartburg is basically Division III national champions every year.
Yeah.
But I know me personally making that transition. You go from, I guess, in high school being the guy to just a nobody, and then really. And one thing about our wrestling is that I never personally ventured outside of Louisiana wrestling, so I kind of had a false sense of really how good of what my ability was, And so one thing I do now is that my son, we wrestle in Texas. I mean, we're not even. I mean, that's what I did with our entire team. Is that we went to Texas. We went to Houston. We did Dallas, and we're like, hey guys, this is real wrestling. And then we came back to Louisiana. Our kids are we're just smashing kids.
So you had a humbling moment. You get out there and you go, hold on, I got to get it together.
Oh yeah, and I don't think I never did at that time. As a young adult, I'm out there on my own, and I just. You're used to being the guy, and all of a sudden, you're a nobody in the practice room. I'm the guy. Like, man, I can't even get a practice partner. Guys just don't want to work with me. They're like, hey, Scallan's not serious. These guys are freaking hungry. And I was just kind of along for the ride. So
then, what's the transition from that? Because I'm over here working professionally. At this point, I'm already out of college. I'm hearing Eric's, wrestling in college on and off.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you step into a ring.
Right. Yeah. So it was just that thing is that I just wasn't done with my athletic career. I feel like I had, the Rocky Balboa, right? I had stuff in the basement. I had unfinished. I was 20 years old. I remember going on websites and I was trying to recruit myself. And I drove by this gym and it had this big chinky sign that says MMA. I'm like, all right, cool. Like this seems legit. Right. It was like
it's a sign.
Yeah. Right. So, but I'll tell you this, man, with wrestling, you don't get the love, like no one, when we have a wrestling match, no one goes, no one cares.
No.
There's no fame, there's no, but
it's a very silent grind.
Yeah. Right. And it's just, it's not as nearly as rewarding. Right. And so when you do an MMA match, people care. Like it's a big deal. Like people it's a giant show. It's more sports entertainment, and I think when I did it, like my first match, it was in a ring. They brought in Roy Jones Jr. to go and watch. They had female fighters.
Let's go.
They brought in UFC fighters to come. So it was like a big spectacle, right? And I remember when you win, I remember so one of these big, it's kind of a little personal thing, but when I wanted to win state. I wanted to go and hug my mom, right? Because we, obviously we had our past, right?
Sure.
And so I wanted to hug my mom so much, and so I have this picture where actually I get my hand raised, right? And I got my hand raised, and I'm pointing to my mom, And so to me, to really looking back, it's just an amateur fight. It's a glorified sparring session, but to me, it was so much more. So you just got, man, just the amount of attention, the amount of praise that you got, people just care about it. And really all I did was go in there and wrestle people with some punches and kicks, but it really wasn't that much different. But yeah, and then we did a couple other amateur matches. We ended up doing this tournament. Me and Poirier actually traveled to Iowa, and we actually did this tournament. I actually fought 3 times in 2 days, and I won this amateur world title, which I don't even think that really makes sense. But it was a world title, right? But to me, I was a world champion. I was. I went out there, I fought 3 guys in 2 days, like stuff they do in Japan. I was really proud of that. And so eventually you get to the point where you really can't find any more amateurs, and you start doing pro fights, and it's like, hey, this dude's going to give me $2,000 to fight. All right, cool. Then hey, this guy's going to sponsor me, and I'm going to buy some tea. You know what I'm saying? So all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm actually making a little money now. And just kind of progress from there.
Well, we're going to talk about how amazing your mom is in a second, but. So tell me a little bit about that. So you step into this amateur fight, because I know the internal feeling, and I don't know if a lot of, there's some people that go their whole life without that feeling.
Right. And
you step on a mat, and man, you got no way out.
Right. Yeah.
There's a reason why there's a song that says that.
Yeah.
There's literally no easy way out. You're either going through the person or they're going through you.
Yeah.
But then, Eric, this is where I'm sitting here going, wow, because you and I went through those matches. I saw you fight on a mat, not literally, but I saw you wrestle. That by itself is the closest thing you get. But then all of a sudden, you're stepping in a ring,
right,
and somebody's trying to take your head off, literally. Yeah. So what does that feel like at that point? Because
Yeah.
you're stepping into a ring, and I'm not even just talking about like getting pro, because at that point you probably have gotten used to that feeling. But the first time you
You
don't.
never get used to it. The fear is
All right.
always there. And so I
Tell me
would
about
say
it.
this, man, is that, the fear never leaves you. And to kind of get to some of the mental side of fighting is that, man, I'm real big into this. We talk about this, it's called the circle of control, right? And this is done by, I know a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs do this stuff. But it's like, all right, well, what in my life can I control and what can I not control, right? And so I have this fight coming up. I can't control what people say about me. I can't control what my opponent's doing. I can't control what the crowds and how the crowd is going to react to it. But I can control my diet. I can control my training. I can control my mindset. I can control how much I consume social media. So it's all these things. So just knowing that what I can control and what I cannot control, and that's kind of what you focus on. And then the one of the ways I deal with fear and anxiety is, one, by making peace with it. Right? Hey, it's a very real possibility that I could get knocked out. I could get choked out. I've been choked unconscious in front of my mom. I woke up unconscious and my mom's crying. So I've experienced a lot of these things. And once you make peace with all these things, it's like, okay, well, this could happen. And actually, I've never been knocked out in a competition because I always find a way to get to the ground somehow. But it's actually the most painless way to lose a fight, because
Just to get knocked out.
You don't remember it. You don't remember. You just kind of just go down, And so I would say, a lot of the mental a lot of the preparation eases my anxiety, right? Hey, I know my cardio's there. I've done the hard sparring rounds already. I know I can go, 5-minute rounds if I need to, and then I have a game plan that we're going to stick to. And the hardest part of a fight is waiting to warm up. You're just waiting in the back. Usually I get like a pillow and actually I go to sleep. And then while you're sleeping, people are coming in and out the locker room. Some are cheering, some are crying, some are getting bloodied up. And you kind of just block all that out and say, that has nothing to do with me, right? That's not in my circle of control. And then once you start warming up, you start wrapping your hands. It's just, hey, you go through your routine again, right? You shake out, you shadow box, you stretch, you hit mitts, you wrestle, and then you just wait. And I think the walkout, your song hits, the crowd, and I've learned to like embrace it instead of trying to block all of it out, but like enjoy that moment. Like, yeah, this is my walkout song. I walk out the Master P, True, Hootie Hoo, right? And I had a therapist ask me why. I was like, wow, it's just some gangster shit. It's just some stuff like when you're in high school and we would go fight someone. We're listening to just some rich white kids, cranking up some Master P about to go fight someone. So she really grilled me on that. Like, well, why'd you choose that song? I was like, I don't know. It just,
Because I'm from New Orleans.
Yeah, exactly. That was my response.
You said her, it was a woman?
Yeah. And
It's from New Orleans, woman.
I kept telling her,
That's why we're listening to Master P before we go
I kept
get in
telling
the
her.
pit.
Yeah, and then when the closed door, when the cage door closes, there's this eerie, awkward silence where it's just, oh, this is about to happen. And look, and man, everybody wants out. Like, nobody really loves it and enjoy it. There's certain fear, and when you win, it's not the excitement of I won. It's a relief that it's over. Like, oh man, I'm glad this is over. And so, yeah, it's a love-hate relationship. To an extent.
You believe everybody is like that? Every single person that enters that ring's like that?
They're all scared. Oh, they're all scared. But it's just how there's a great quote. Oh, God, I'm drawing a blank right. The boxing trainer, Teddy Atlas, right? So he's in his fighter's corner, and he's like, we don't run away from the fire. We're
firemen.
We're firemen,
dude. I've played this for these guys nonstop.
We're firemen, right? And so that's what he's talking about. Is just like, and that's about taking and I tell this to kids all the time, is taking your fear and anxiety. And that's what martial arts is all about, is channeling that in the positive direction. Don't let it consume you, right? You feel the flame, right? But learn to control it and manipulate it and use it in the correct way, right? What's that?
So you're probably already a fantastic coach.
Yeah.
So you said use it in which way?
Well, you use it in something positive. So that fear and anxiety, well, I'm going to go use that to go run. I'm going to go lift weights after this, and I'm going to, that fear and anxiety, better believe the thought of me getting knocked out or getting choked out in front of every single one of that scares me. So it's a healthy fear. Fear is good. Fear is an animal instinct, right? I mean, all animals have fear and anxiety, and it's to keep you freaking alive. but once you let it consume you, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's what it is. I think a lot of people in life just don't have a healthy outlet. Maybe mine's a little bit more extreme, but with other people, like, you need to be able to paint. You need to be able to ride your bike. You got to have some type of healthy outlet to express yourself and to deal with that. And that's what creates such a fantastic the human experience, right?
You pray before you walk in that cage?
I'm definitely more of the spiritual variety. I found a lot of peace in just knowing that, hey, there's a higher power out there, and it's not me. And I think in my life, once I really made peace with that, my life just got so much easier. To kind of get on the spiritual side, we went to all boy Catholic school. I turned full blown atheist for a while, and there was but one thing I've learned is that there's not too many happy atheists. Like,
That's right.
They're really the most miserable people. They're so just self-righteous and like, what do you know? It's just like, it's such a negative. They're not the happiest people. So then I got to a point where I'm like, all right, I don't know if I believe in God, but I can't say for sure that there isn't. And then who am I in my limited mindset that there is or there isn't and whatnot, So then I would say I was agnostic for a little bit, and then and then I had this experience. I got real big in hiking. Right, I was kind of going through like a bad breakup and stuff, and some of my demons got the best of me. And this is kind of when like I quit drinking and really cut things out. And I went on a solo hiking trip. I went to Zion National Park. Beautiful. Right, and I was like, I'm going there by myself. I just want to go out there by myself and do my own hiking trip. And I did this 14-mile like hike just by myself. And at the very end, I'm like really exhausted and all this stuff. And I kind of sat down, and I didn't realize that I'm actually looking over Angel's Landing, which is like one of the most beautiful, iconic, considered the most dangerous hike in America. And I'm just looking at this rock, and I remember just, man, they say some you have like a spiritual experience, or some people call it a psychic change, or if you have a spiritual experience, it's like what they call like the wind from a mountaintop, like blowing on you, and it's just overwhelming feeling of peace and calmness. And I think at that time I really made peace of like, hey, I had this happen in my life. I failed in this area. I'm still here. And so just by making peace through that, and then finding God that works through other people, and that's a big thing for me, and then does God work through me? Do I let God work through others? So I've definitely made my peace. And what dude, man, as soon as you stop fighting, right? And then there's the people who have spirituality and religion. I mean, they're powerful. Right, and it's because they have the power of belief, right? And they really they really believe, whether it's real or placebo, whatever it is. They have that belief system, that the utter confidence that comes along with it, and it makes it powerful people. Some of the most successful athletes. I mean, you watch the NCAA finals. It's hey, God this, God, right? And it's because their belief in God, or whether it's God working through them, however you look at it, gives them that belief in themselves and that confidence, and I could go on forever about this, but yeah, confidence is everything, right? I mean, visualization, and
so you think you had a pretty what we call that when you're in nature and you see such a vast, beautiful scenery, you realize it's like, did this happen by chance,
right? Yeah.
Or was this orchestrated by a creator,
right?
So we call it general revelation.
Right.
So
someone told me this at another therapist. I go to a lot there. I go to a lot. I've been through some. I go through a lot. I do a lot of self work. That's. But she was telling me that nature has a way of make you feel very special yet insignificant at the same time. Yeah. I remember going to this waterfall. It's Mooney Falls in Havasupai. It's this place in the Grand Canyon. It's a 220-foot waterfall, red rocks, this emerald green, blue water just streaming, and you can just feel the power coming off of it, right? And I'm like, wow, this is something special, And so,
this was created.
Yeah, right. You sit there, I know nothing. Like I don't. Who am I to say that there is no God and whatnot? And Yeah, so I mean, that's a whole nother chapter in itself, but I've really pursued that, and that's why I love hiking so much. I love just, just being out there. And I went hiking with a friend the other day, and she's like, oh, well, what kind of music will we listen to? I'm going to bring my speaker. I said, no, you don't bring your speaker. But you listen to that freaking waterfall, listen to that bald eagle flying above us, and
Yeah.
Anyway.
Before you walk into this pit, because that's what we're talking about, you're talking about fires, fear, mindset. Now we're talking about making peace. I think, depending on if, we look to Jesus as Lord and or God, creator, whatever you tend to call that. I think, I believe it's Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely.
Praying, being at peace, walking in, gate shuts, you're wide open.
You let your training do the work. There's not really a thought process behind it. Maybe like in between rounds, I've had fear overwhelm me before. I fought this guy in my first fight in Bellator, which is a major organization. It actually went under recently, but major organization. I'm fighting this guy, Derek Krantz, and I was kind of chatting it up with him beforehand, like he's like local Louisiana guy. And then, man, I remember we got in that cage. I remember him just freaking looking at me. I'm like, oh, I'm scared of this guy. Like, I remember just like, this guy wants to kill me right now, and I fought scared. And anyway, that was one of a big loss of mine. But my point is that, man, sometimes you rise to the occasion, sometimes you don't. But you let your training do the work, man. And that's what it's all about. There shouldn't be a thought process. Now, I've had fights where, hey, my whole game plan was it was a 5-round fight. I fought this guy from Florida, Danny Ruiz, and I wanted to take him down, put him on his back, and beat him, pound him out. Well, guess what? For 2 rounds, I couldn't take him down.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I was having success with my jab and my body kick. And I remember talking, and Poirier was actually in my corner. I said, I can just touch this guy. I can touch this guy for 15 minutes. So the ability, so what makes a real good fighter, you see at the higher level, is their ability to make adjustments in the middle of the fight, and you can see their game plan starting to shift. And that's what makes a good fighter. They know how to make adjustments. Like, hey, this isn't working. Hey, I'm going to switch to this. And they have just a lot of options,
So tell me about that. So take it a step further. So you said you and Dustin, we'll use him as an example just because most people know the name. Shout out to Louisiana guy about to finish up his career, right? Which I love. First of all, I love the fact that you said everybody's scared, and you were humble enough to say fear got the best of me. I don't know if there's a lot of men specifically in the fight game that'll say, "Oh, I got a little scared."
Oh, they're all liars. Yeah.
Well, and they're lying to themselves.
Maybe like Chuck Liddell was only the exception to the rule. There's some sociopaths.
Why you met Chuck and he's
no? I've heard that. That's why they call him the Iceman. Is that because he really doesn't. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a very anxiety-ridden. I have a high anxiety for my fight.
So what made? Because you came in as an amateur. I mean, obviously you mentioned, hey, I don't think my ultimate goal was ever to be like the world of world champions. You said that, right? But what do you think set him apart when you're looking at the progression?
Yeah.
And you train people, and you've been in corners, and you've run a gym. Right. What do you think separates that amateur / professional that's got some success to the guy who goes and beats Conor McGregor twice?
Yep.
And some other pretty big names, right?
Right. I could talk about Dustin specifically. I mean, we have a great relationship, and we've been training a long time together. But man, Dustin was just hungry, man. He didn't come from a privileged background like I did. Dustin, he comes from a rough upbringing. He went to Daniel Cormier jokes about this, but he actually went to the same high school as Daniel Cormier, as a Northside High. It's a predominantly black school, and so Dustin, came from a rough environment, and he was one that, man, he was 18 years old, and I'm kind of still, in college. I'm at community college. My mom has helped me out. I got this little job, and Dustin was 18, had a full-blown job and a house and a car. Dude had a mortgage at 18, so he was a guy that at a young age just got it together because he didn't have a choice.
He had to grow up.
Oh yeah, he had to grow up, really quick. I could still call my mom for $50 if I really needed to, And so this was a guy. So I think that fundamentally that's what separated us. But then he just showed up, You know, and at the both time, we were both just showing up. We showed up. We traveled. We went to fights together. You know, and we'd be watching fights, and I would get drunk and pass out at the fights, and he's watching the whole thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So no, but this is something. This is something he said he was going to do. If you watch there's a documentary. It's called Fightville. So Fightville actually just coincidentally came into our gym right around the time where me and Dustin were about to both turn pro. So this guy, Michael Tucker, literally found a diamond in the rough and found Dustin at such a young age, and watched his career just progress and until he made it to the WC and then eventually the UFC. But I would say, man, he's a competitor. For a long time, like I could hold him off with some of my wrestling and just not engage. I can't do that anymore. Like a lot of times, like I won't even hard spar with him anymore. It's like, I know how this ends. I know how this ends. He's going to beat me every single time. If I hit him, he's going to hit me back twice as hard and twice as fast. It's just.
So do you think it's just compounding over the years? Is that what you're saying?
I think we're students Dustin is a student of the game. Dustin will come into my beginner class and he'll learn some stuff, and he'll also like, hey, I like to do this, and we're always learning, we're always progressive, and that's what a martial artist is. I have like some lower ranked guys from other gyms that would come in and they'll show me a move. I say, man, what'd you just do there? I like to do this. I'm like, oh, okay. But you never get to a point. I think, the thing, the difference between wrestling and like martial arts is that wrestling is like, no, this is our style. This is the way we do it. This is how it should be done. And, martial arts isn't like that. Certainly it's good to have a system, and I get it as a coach. You want to have a system to build off of and to coach off of, but having an open mind, right? And that's what, Bruce Lee, like he started his martial arts called Cajun Dome, right? And basically it was a combination of all the martial arts together. Like in his book, he actually shows the jab, he shows the single leg, and so we kind of came from that background. Our first actual martial arts instructor came from that background.
Did you struggle with that from wrestling, having a rigid system coming from our coach who was very rigid, to now all of a sudden you got to be able to be a little open-minded and say that actually works, so I need to try that? Like, was that a struggle, or was it a relief for you?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was a struggle, but like this, I stayed open-minded, and certainly I had my biases with wrestling, so I would go against these jiu-jitsu guys and I would just smash them, until eventually you get to these higher levels. I remember doing as a white belt, like I have a few months experience and I'm going through these tournaments. I'm just smashing these guys that have been doing jiu-jitsu. Cause look, if you've been wrestling, you're basically a higher level jiu-jitsu guy, but jiu-jitsu has like more of a flow to it, but then until I went against this brown belt, which is almost a black belt. And this guy the way he could just maneuver and manipulate me. I see wrestling is much more forceful, right? And jiu-jitsu has much more of a flow to it, so that's kind of the difference,
Yeah. So a couple things. As you say that, two things. We'll go to knowing the percentage of people that win championships or have a ton of success in the UFC. Let's use that because that's really
it's kind of the golden standard, right?
That's the golden standard. The large majority of them are wrestlers, right? Background,
right?
So what do you think? Why do you think that is? I guess the more you say that, because it's forceful, and then you pull in like this flow state of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Right. And I would say, each sport is different. Wrestling is different from kickboxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, different goals, different objectives, totally different rule sets, even the difference between folk style wrestling and freestyle and Greco. It's just totally different sports. I would say you see a lot more wrestlers become world champions. One, it's just the mindset, right? The wrestling mindset, the training mentality, but also these are guys that participated in one of the hardest sports in the world, one of the oldest sports in the world. But I know a lot of these these wrestlers that got into martial arts, a lot of them don't even use their wrestling. Look at Eli Taporia, right? I'm probably saying his name all wrong. Eli, I think he actually started off Greco-Roman wrestling when he was 5 years old, right? He will box your head off. So I think he just came from that background and transitioned into martial arts. So using some of that training mentality, the mental toughness. I don't know if you remember, you went to that Destin camp, the Russ Heckelson Ohio State camp?
No.
Okay.
I rolled my ankles right before.
Okay. So we went to this, and we worked with this, the head coach from Ohio State, and he talked about how his dad used to make him carry rocks. Just pick up big rocks and boulders and like run with them. Run with the rock, drop it, pick it up. And he goes, "Do you know what that did for me physically?" He goes, "Nothing." But it was the fact that I was willing to do that. So he talked about how that was just more of just building mental toughness. And I think just wrestlers just have that mental, like I said, we talked about, there's no reward for wrestling. No one cares. You're in this old dirty gym. Maybe your parents are there watching you, other wrestlers. There's no one says, "Hey, I'm going to go watch some kids wrestle this weekend," And so
we say that.
Well, yeah, right. So yeah, I'll go check it out. But yeah, look at like guys like Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje wrestled for Arizona, right? Arizona State. He was a Sun Devil. He shot maybe one takedown his entire wrestling career. Kumar. Anyway, so I think a lot
of mindset building in.
Right, it's the mindset, and then as far as but being martial arts, you got to be good at everything. And that's what's so scary now is that it's no longer. I think maybe I was the last, my time frame was the last generation of a pure boxer, a pure wrestler, a pure karate guy getting into martial arts. Wrestler versus boxer. It's that is so out the window. Now these kids are doing everything at such a young age. And as you know, if anything you do at a young age, I mean, man, there's no comparison. They have guys that come to my gym, they're 25, they never wrestled, they never kickboxed, never did karate, and they say, "Hey, I want to fight." I say, "Good luck." Let's be real. I don't care how good of an athlete you are. There's just no possible way you can catch up. And man, these kids, they can blend things together so well.
So you mentioned before as a good coach. First of all, you were saying some things that I coach all of our kids' sports. Right, my daughter's in competitive soccer, so it just took a back seat. But I see it, right? You see it in other coaches. You see people who are good coaches, great coaches, and the ones that really probably should let somebody else coach.
Right.
But you mentioned before, Blaze was talking to you about before he's about to have a baby. Shout out to Blaze. What do you think is the best discipline? Now, you answered that beautifully before. If you want to restate that, but what do you think would be the best foundational piece for a child?
Well, I guess for martial arts or for life?
For martial arts.
Okay, I say for
life.
Yeah, for life. Yeah. Well, it's all the same. It's all interconnected, right?
Yeah.
I would say, so someone asked me, should I put my kid in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Should I put him in wrestling? And I firmly believe is that whatever you can find something that your kid is passionate about and something they want to do 2-3 times a week, and obviously they all have their days where they don't want, they didn't get their nap or they had a rough day at school, and that's our job as a parent to push our kids, but you want to find something that's fun for them, help your child develop their passion and what they love. I've done a lot of work on development of younger athletes. It's all about fun, and it's a very blurry line. I want my kid to win. I want him to be successful, especially in wrestling. I mean, I'll go down this rabbit hole for a second, but I'll circle back. But I wanted my son to win state this year. And he was very, very capable of winning. He was older in his division. I knew that he was finally ready to really punch through. And so what I had to do personally was, one, we had to get him out of Louisiana and start wrestling some higher level guys, right? He needed to be humbled a little bit. I also had to accept that I could not coach him 100%. So I actually brought in this girl, Raven Guidry. She was actually an All-American in college, I think Oklahoma City College. I brought her in. I said, "Hey, I want you to coach my team." I said, "I really want you to coach my son because I don't want my son should be able to come to me, right?" It creates a weird dynamic, right? I couldn't really explain it right now, but I needed someone to step in and coach my son. I needed to step back. And even though I'm kind of whispering in this girl's ear,
yes,
the voice couldn't come from me. And one exercise I would suggest to any parent that's struggling is, they even suggested that you have a hat, right? And it can say coach, it can say dad. So that way, when you talk to your kid, you can have your coaching hat, or for me, I just use this Gladiators hat, right? And I'll tell my son, I said, hey, you're talking to your coach right now, and I'll give him instruction. Or then when I see him, I said, hey, and I'll tell him, hey, you're talking to your dad right now. You know, so that was really important because, man, kids quit, and even adults quit on the ride home. You know, it's like, man, let them have fun, let them enjoy it, because right at a young age, you want them to develop a love for the sport and a love for the game, because they can win all they want, and we see this all the time in wrestling. Crazy wrestler dad, you know, they push him too hard, and I mean, we saw this growing up too. But man, just the ability to turn that switch and say, hey, that was practice. We're over with it now. 70% of kids that do competitive wrestling they do not compete after the age of 11.
Whoa.
Yeah, 70%, and that's a staggering figure. You know, and so that's one thing I really looked at and really took a step back. And so when my son, he's done with wrestling season right now, a lot of my kids transferred back to jiu-jitsu. I'm like, no, he's doing flag football. And then for a brief second, he's like, yeah,
so wise.
Yeah, I was like, dude, I was like, no, he did what he was supposed to do. I said, hey, you want to do this national tournament? And he goes, Dad, I already did a bunch of national tournaments. And I said, okay. You know, it's hard because you want to, we're going to be state champ, man. You know, like, but it's like, but he just won that title. But then I caught myself saying, hey, well, you could be a national champion. And it's like, bro, just take a step back, you know. And so that's been the hardest part. And as a parent, I can tell you this. You coach your son differently. Get someone else to coach them. And when you leave practice, shut up. And just leave him alone. Just leave him alone, man. Just let him. You already had that time. You don't need to say, oh, man, what you did, just shut up. Go get some ice cream, As far as for what martial arts to do, I think kids nowadays are becoming specialists at a very early age. We joke around, say the crazy travel baseball dad. These kids all the gear, and these kids all they do is baseball. Well, what life lessons do baseball teach? And certainly, I mean, baseball. There's some of the best athletes in the world. Some guys that transfer from baseball to martial arts they're fantastic. They're timing, they're sharp, they're explosive. But every sport has a lesson to teach. I think wrestling teaches individual accountability. Same with more anything that we have to walk out on a mat and be there by yourself is going to teach perseverance, individual accountability. When you lose that match, who can you blame? You can't blame anybody. You can try to blame. I could try to blame Ray Charbonneau for all my failures, but I know that it 100% falls on me. And football has its life lessons too, which I'm not as familiar with, but certainly there's teamwork, accountability. How many times? And I remember you telling me something about this, where guys saying, "Oh, I did my job." It's like, well, hold up, you did your job, but hey, sometimes you got to pick up the slack.
That's right.
So so I think every sport has their own metaphor. I could talk about that forever. But as far as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or wrestling, what's going to keep them on the mat the longest? One has more of a flow state. One comes from a more defensive, self-defense orientation,
which is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Right, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Wrestling can be a lot more aggressive, but but I don't know. But the way I even teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is more of a wrestling foundation. So, but yeah, just get them on the mat, make it fun, and who cares? If your kid wants to finger paint, let him finger paint. If he wants to, my son wants to be a chef, dude. He wants to do acting classes.
Dad would like the chef and keep his meal prep on point.
Yeah, right.
Well, let me throw this out here, and you tell me, you give me a grade on this one. But I made a decision. As you say that, it's confirmation. I love hearing it from guys that are high level, that are coaches, that have success, not only in the sport, but you're a parent. Your son just won state. I bought a mat last Christmas, and
I saw that. Yeah.
And I bought shoes, and then after they opened them, something in my mind said, "Don't let him put those shoes on." And I put the shoes in the closet. I ended up having to bring them back. Okay. This is a Christmas present.
Right.
And the reason why is because when we unrolled the mat, it was like my sons wanted to wrestle with Dad.
Yeah.
It was fun. We're sweating. I'm indirectly teaching them some technique.
Yeah.
And you mentioned fun so many times, and I had this overwhelming sense. And actually, it was the same feeling. So years back, I went to Egypt. for a mission trip.
Okay.
And these kids were in this pool and we're playing like this. All it was wrestling in a pool with a little ball and you're trying to get it to the next goal. I mean, that's a made up game, right? And the senior pastor, strong guy, who's on Florida State's campus, said, Paul, this is probably the only time that strong men ever wrestled with these guys. And I'm talking about like 15, 16, almost 20-year-old guys.
Yeah.
And we put the shoes up, and 2 days ago they wanted the mat out. Now I brought them structured to St. Paul's, and they got to learn some moves. And but man, I wonder how many times we push as dads. And that's where we got to really set our own desires aside.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what
It's hard.
So do you have a lot of interaction with the parents? Do you talk to them about this stuff, or is this
That's a dude. We do a whole podcast on that, man.
Yeah.
Is that I would say as far as with my interactions with the parents is that, man, we say, hey, let us coach them. I know we've had I got some parents coaching behind their back. I mean, I do. I remember this happened this year. A kid is in the middle of the match. He goes and looks at his dad. So in between rounds, and so we're going to tell him, hey, top, bottom, or neutral. And sometimes neutral is where you start from standing, right?
Sure.
He looks at his dad, and his dad said, take bottom. And I was like, no, and because at that specific time, it's like, no, you take neutral because you can get this takedown, you can score a lot quicker like this. And it was just, and we had to tell him that, just say, man, like, I want you to have that father-son experience. But first, if you are coaching your son, let us know what you're talking about. But the thing, you don't know what you're talking about, and this is why you're taking them to us. You know what I'm saying? Like I hired a coach, to coach my son because of that same reason. Don't be the exception to the rule. And that the fact is that, look, kids learn through play, they learn through fun. And man, they don't learn by we got to do step 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's no. Are we having fun? Hey, remember that game we played? We play the game with British Bulldog, right? British Bulldog teaches you to hey move on your hands and knees and balance and how to shift your weight side to side. We do one. It's capture the tail. What do? You take a shirt and put in your back, and someone has to. And so you're working on your stance and cutting angles and hand fighting and stuff, but. We want it to be fun. I can't stress that enough. Is that when they leave, it's a delicate balance of did they get better? Was it fun? Was it educational? Were they challenged? And then you can see these kids. They make a mistake and they look at their parents. And you just feel their parents just looking at them. So what type of positive experience? So what are they going to think about that sport? They're going to hate it. They're going to hate it, and they're going to resent you for it. You're going to be like the dad from Friday Night Lights.
Oh,
you know what?
Fire that pigskin.
Why can't you hold on to the football, right? Right. That was a great.
I don't want your life.
Yeah, right. He's got the ring. He's like, you see this? You'll never have it. He kicks out the window. He's got the big jug of chocolate milk. He's just chugging it, and it's just fantastic, right? I mean,
as God lives and breathes, I got to tell you, man.
Friday Night Lights is one of my favorite movies for sure.
It's almost like being reconnected with a family member when we're talking. I'm sitting here, dude. I got to tell you, I'm blown away right now, and I want to just now would be a good time to transition, not to get too serious, but I want to talk about.
I want to ask you, so what happened? So why'd you put the shoes back? So I'm sorry,
just because I feel like if they would have put the shoes on, it almost would have felt like work.
Right.
Dad's got a tendency to say, okay, now we're doing this. Let's get to work. Right. Let's get focused. Let's do this. We ended up buying another set of shoes because they grew out of those. So we traded them in. And then we went to a structured practice with a club.
I got you.
I wanted that to be more relaxed, fun, like you say, flow state. Yeah. Let me teach you some things, but not take it too serious. And then when we went to a team, I let that coach. Now, Dad was there on the fringe, helping them. But I'll give you a quick example. This is maybe, November last year. We would stay for 2 hours because I was helping the coach just kind of manage all the kids, right? I'm not teaching any moves or anything like that. I wrestled heavyweight. I can't teach a head throw over there. But we're in the second hour. First hour is younger kids. Second hour is a little bit more advanced, older kids. Dickie leaves with his kids, right? So they get a little focused in. They're both wrestling. My 7-year-old and my 9-year-old are wrestling kids that are more advanced. And then I'm watching them, and they're just getting their heads kicked in.
Yeah.
And it started with my 9-year-old, and we're probably 10 minutes deep live wrestle. I mean, they're in it. They're deep. The deepest I've ever seen them.
Yeah.
And I could just feel it. It's getting heavy in the room. And, dude, I saw him battle. I saw something break open in his heart.
It's a cool feeling, right? You're like, oh, he's got a heart, you know?
I was like, that's what every man wants to see his son do is I don't care if he wins that spar, you know, that I care that he battled. And, you know, he had some success.
Yeah.
And then I saw his little brother. It was almost like immediately after, God's like just giving me this vision of what could be. And, dude, he starts crying.
Yeah.
He's crying, and everything in me wanted to go to my son and comfort him, and I just had this sense of don't move.
Yeah.
And I pull back and I look at Grant, who's about to be the Holy Cross coach.
Yeah.
And I look at Grant, and Grant kind of gives me a quick little nod, so my kid couldn't see him, and walks up to him and whispers something in his ear like, "Hey, buddy."
Yeah.
I think it was something along the lines of, "Now's the time to get tough."
Yeah.
And, dude, I saw him break loose.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here going, I love football with all my heart. You know that.
Yeah.
I love watching kids compete. I've learned to love soccer because of my daughter. Who would have thought a guy from Gentilly would love soccer?
Yeah.
I thought sissies played soccer. But, dude, there's nothing I can think of that gets a kid to a place like they just got to. Like wrestling did that.
Yeah.
And I saw him, and I'm thinking, hey, that's why we're here.
And he did it without you too. I mean, like I said, a kid can't ride a bike, right? If you're holding on that back seat forever and eventually. But that's growth. I could applaud you for that as a parent because you want to jump in. But that's like I talked about. The kids need to have their moment, you know. And if they're down on themselves, and you're always interjecting yourself into that moment, it's like, man, what, you know, he may not rise up at that exact moment, you know, but. You know, eventually they will. You know, and sometimes the coach just knows the right thing to say at the right time, and just say look, hey, let's go, you got this. You know, they need to hear from the right person at the right time, or sometimes they don't need to hear nothing at all. You know, and so it's hard to distinguish what's right, you know, what's wrong. You know,
well, it's good because on the ride home, my wife called me and said, "Where y'all at? What's going on right now?" I said, "We stopped at Chick-fil-A." She said, "Why? I cooked dinner." I said. And they're yelling in the back, "We got ice cream."
Yeah.
And she said, "Why'd you get them ice cream?" I said, "Because they deserve it."
Yeah. I tell my son all the time, and as I said, I walk a thin line with my ex-wife, and then my son even goes to like counseling and stuff, you know, and I walk a thin line with her, you know, and you know, one thing I've learned is just when we go to wrestle, I say, "Hey, why are we here?" And he knows we're here to get better. I say, "That's it. We're here to get better, all right." And when he hops off the mat, I say, you know, I give him his moment. I said, "What'd you learn?" I was like, "What'd you do good? What'd you do bad? What could you have done better?" Okay, you know, that's all that matters. You know, it's just that progression. You know,
So let's talk about. I want to bring up your mom for a second because I think I would. Well, one, obviously your brother was my wrestling captain. Then I was your wrestling captain, and then I assume you were the captain the next year.
Yeah.
And you think about like the progression of that, your mom always created a safe space for me in my life. And I just want to go on record. This thing is released. If it's a clip that's sent to her, I got to thank her so much because there were so many times that I was at your house just trying to get a good night's rest. But I distinctly remember being an about to be 19-year-old guy with no driver's license. And we went to go use your truck, right? Because my parents didn't have any insurance. And you were saying I don't even remember your taillight being out.
Yeah. We went to get your driver's license. And so you're going to use my car to get your driver's license. And yeah, I think we had to call my mom to come over there and come help us out. You know, you got to get your driver's license in a Lexus.
The brand new Lexus.
A brand new Lexus. You know.
You guys have been so kind, and I see the marks you left on your life and your family.
Yeah, and I think one thing a good parent will do, and you know, when your kids get in a dark time, their consciousness, their conscious is your parents' voice. You know, I know one thing. Like my mom used to always say this, and this is, you know, we had somewhat of an estranged relationship. You know, my junior senior year, but my mom used to always say, you know, it's so cheesy. She goes, "Eye the tiger, Eric. Eye the tiger," which is like the most cliche like motivation thing, but no, I can still hear my mom's voice, you know, in my head cheering me on. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just sometimes just by being that positive voice, you know, I can still hear a lot of my coaches or a lot of mentors that I had in my head, you know, that just, like I said, people want a leader, people want a mentor, people want to be led, and you be good and loving and caring to everyone, and it's so funny, like how being a martial arts instructor, you become in life, you become the person that you always needed as a child.
Say that again.
I said in life, you become the person you always needed as a child, right? So we have this inner child. We have this, who did Paul need? Who did Paul need when he was 16, 18? I guarantee you're that person right now. I guarantee it, because you devote your entire life to that. I had a lot of insecurities, and maybe I got beat up, or I had some issues. Things happened to me. Well, guess what? I devoted my entire life to martial arts to make sure that never happened again. I remember going to wrestling camps like at Grace King High School, and these high school guys were coaching us. And I remember thinking, man, he's the coolest guy in the world. I just loved being in that camp around those guys. And I remember going to wrestling camps and like, oh, this guy's a college wrestler. I want to do that. And then it's weird. I literally work with children every day. Every day they walk into my gym, and it's like you get burnout on everything, right? No matter what you do, there's going to be burnout. But man, they walk in there like, hey, what's up, dude? And give him a high five. Or I grab this little 5-year-old, I put him in a headlock and like just throw him on the ground, and it's just like, well, this is really my job. It's just to mess around with a kid. Dude, and these kids, they look up to you, man. They'll do anything you say. So if I talk to them about perseverance, I talk to them about one thing we have like a word of the month, right? And this month we're talking about composure. And so just say, hey, is it okay? And we talk about this. How many of y'all get scared? Is it okay to be scared? And they're going to say, no, it's not okay. It's like, no, it is okay to be scared, right? How have you showed composure in class? How have you showed composure at home? And then trying to teach those lessons, through martial arts.
Think about that. Think about that at our age. When we were younger, if somebody would have taught you about composure. Yeah, right. Like, how bad did we need to hear that? Yeah. All right, so we'll kind of land this plane. You're about to have, is it going to be your last fight? You don't really know, but you're about to have a fight.
Man, I got some tax issues, man, so I'm
about to get after it?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, honestly, I feel great. I'm 39. I know, a fighter's peak, ideally, is usually around the age of 34 to 36. Yeah. And the reason being is that's when your testosterone is the highest, but also your skill set and knowledge. Nice. Now, some guys have been into a lot of wars. So for example, Poirier is probably about 34, 32. My point is that he's younger than me, right? But maybe a guy like that has got a lot more damage. You know what I'm saying? So I haven't been in that many like wars. Yeah. I'm not going to stand and trade with you. I'm going to grab your leg, and I'm going to avoid as much punishment as possible, and I'm going to get this to the ground. So the way that I've lost has been like through submissions or I submit. I haven't taken a lot of damage to my head or to my brain. So I feel like I got some highway miles, but no, I feel great, man. I started losing weight. I got real serious on a diet plan. I started lifting weights again, and all of a sudden I lost weight. I'm like, well, man, I never actually retired. I just kind of stepped back from it, and me personally, for a while, it was a love-hate relationship. Fighting is big highs and big lows. Big highs, big lows. And I felt for me that it was unhealthy for me, right? The highs were too high, and it kind of put me in a manic state, and the lows were a little too low. So I was like, man, I want to level out a little bit. But no, at the end of the day, man, it's kind of who I am. It's who I love. It's the things I love to do. And it's one thing to be a coach, but as a coach, when I say, hey, I'm fighting again, people get excited, man. Oh, I bet. You just get, it's hard to walk away from that. A lot of people have to be forced out, and that's why some guys hold on a little bit too long. And this is not my experience, but a lot of fighters don't do well after their fight career because they're so used to the big high.
What's their life?
They're so used to that big high, the big rush, the attention. A lot of them turn to drugs and alcohol just to kind of replace that feeling. But I enjoy the process. I think I do better when I have a goal. I think a lot of men, when do people, lay down and die? It's like when they retire. They have nothing to do. They have no focus. They don't know what to do with their lives. They don't have I'm a person, I need a mission. Yes. And if I am not on a mission to be in the best shape of my life, and have these healthy fears to keep me in line, I'm gonna stray. Dude, I'll party, I'll womanize, I'll do everything except what I'm supposed to be doing.
Idle mind, idle hands. Men are not meant to be idle.
No, absolutely not. And just me in particular. I have to have a mission, and whether it's your business or your family or passion project. So I don't know. I mean, I'll do this fight and I'll just see how I feel. So now I'm to the point where I'm not fighting to make it to the UFC. That boat that ship has sailed. I'm content with how far I've made it. I've beaten some real guys. I've beaten guys that are in the top 10 in the UFC right now in my career. And like I said, I just want to rub elbows. And I got that. Hey, I got the rub elbows with this guy. I took that guy down. Hey, I beat that guy. And that's okay with me. I'm okay with my career and how far I made it, and I can go to bed at night and say, yeah, man, I had fun with it. Sure, I wish I would have done some things better, but I'm very content. So now it's just for fun. But then it's like, all right, well, I always said that I would never fight. Put it like this: I'm never going to fight. I'm never going to do it like half-ass. Right?
Yeah, you're going to give it 100%, or you don't do it at all.
You don't. Yeah, either you're going to do this because you don't just play fighting. And so if I'm doing this half-heartedly, that's how you get seriously hurt. And so.
So you're saying you're doing it for fun, but you're still coming.
Oh yeah, I'm still
100%.
100%. Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, dude, I'm still on my diet plan. I'm going to go lift after this. I'm still doing 2 days when I can. Just being a lot smarter, and thank God with my job that I can jump in and out of practice when I need, and I couldn't imagine having like a full-time job and then having to do this on the side. I'm blessed to have a career that I have so much gym. Like yesterday, I grabbed my manager and said, "Hey, hold mitts for me for 30 minutes." Normally you'd have to like hire someone, you'd have to meet them at a certain time. I could just pull them away from the front desk, So, but no, I enjoy the process, man. And with life's a journey. It's not about the destination, right? It's the journey, but also the people that you do the journey with, And so, I've learned to just enjoy the process itself,
So your fight is in Lafayette?
Lafayette, June 15th or 14th. I don't know, one of those days. June 15th, I think.
14th.
Is it 14th? Okay, I don't know. Yeah, June 14th, and it's actually we at the Cajun Dome Convention Center, and they actually have so Aaron Phillips was fighting, former UFC fighter, Melvin Gillard.
I remember Melvin.
Melvin Gillard.
He's back.
He's back. Melvin Gillard is he's got to be 43 or something like that. He's got some miles on him, but he was a legend, man.
Do you remember Melvin in high school?
Yes.
We used to sit there and come out with like a boom box, and my boy was just raw.
Right? You want to talk about Melvin, or do some?
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah. We'll do overtime real quick. Overtime.
Yeah. So Melvin Gillard ended up being I think it was on the Ultimate Fighter season 2. So he started at the main event, right? The main event is in Fat City. Yeah. Joe Ancona ran the joint, and it was just where I actually had my first grappling match. You could just show up on a Friday night and sign your name on a piece of paper, and they would let you fight. Right, and I remember I did like my first grappling match. I ran into like I remember Nick Cusimano, right? I ran into him there, and we did like a grappling match. But Melvin was there, they were pulling guys out the crowd, and he was just knocking them out. But when Melvin wrestled, so it was just this young, athletic, black guy, and he had this boombox.
Which, to point out why you're even pointing out the fact black guy, because in the sport of wrestling,
right,
even in a southern state,
right, it's
a predominantly white sport. Or at least it was.
Right.
Now I feel like it's opening up.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. But it was so they were at Bonneville High School, which back in the day used to have a fantastic wrestling. My dad actually wrestled for Bonneville, but then he had this guy. His name was Warren Donnelly. Came in, and just remember, Bonneville came in out of nowhere. They had 8 kids that were just solid. And anyway, the funny story about Melvin was that he was just a raw athlete. He beat up all the guys he toyed around with some kid from Brother Martin. I think Terrio is the guy's name, but he had this boombox, right? And so and it was Rocky playing 24/7. I remember one of the guys lost, and he goes and he changes the CD and he puts on No Easy Way Out.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it was just so funny. I mean, he had his boombox, man. He walked around with it, and he was just unstoppable.
He would wreck shop, dude.
Just murder people.
He was fun to watch.
Yeah. It was just
so he's fighting with same card.
Same card.
14th.
Same card. Yeah. And that's pretty cool. I got the wrestle. I wrestled against his teammate Terry Verdon, I think the guy's name was, and I actually bounced with him one time at the Jimmy Club. You know, he was a bouncer, but then, man, he went on a tear, and so again, he just probably in the same situation as me. You know, probably needs a little extra cash. You know, probably still loves it. You know, like and you know, you have no right to tell anyone. You know when they need to stop. You know, that's a personal decision. You know? And so, who are you to say this guy? He's made a living doing this. You know, is he past his prime? Sure. Am I past my prime? Absolutely. Hey, if I want to do it, I'm gonna do it. You know, so.
Eric, thank you for coming in, dude. Yeah. I got to tell you, I'm extremely impressed. Not that, and I don't mean that in any sort of way. I mean, it's one thing to be successful at something. It's another thing to have a heart to teach it because you love it. All right. And dude, you got an amazing family, and you battled a lot, and we're excited we're trying to get a group to come out to Lafayette. I definitely want to promote every single person that's in the area, whether it's, you know, Louisiana or Texas. Go see my guy Eric, and any undercard, Melvin, a couple Louisiana guys. Yep. You got anything you want to finish out with?
No, that's it, man. It's just I'm just blessed to be here, and just, I mean, I guess one thing is just I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I love. You know, I'm sure you do what you love for a living, and you know, you love helping people and setting up people's families and stuff like that. And then, you know, I think a lot of people have a job that they just hate, and you know, certainly, you know, as a man, there's certain times in your life that you have to do things you don't want to do. But then when you find your purpose, you know, what they say, your goal in life is to find your purpose, you know, and then to pursue it, you know. And I think I've found my purpose, you know, and then that's a blessing right there, you know, just to find my purpose in life and to pursue it, you know, passionately, you know. So I'm very fortunate.
Do you want to say anything about Ben Bordelon before we finish?
Ben Bordelon, man, I love Ben Bordelon. Yeah, what do I want to say about Ben Bordelon? I mean, just a freak athlete. I mean, just quiet, mean. So a funny story about Ben Bordelon, right? So I think it was after like a New Year's Eve. We had like the New Year's Day practice, right? And dude, Ben was just, I would do anything. Like, I loved y'all so much. And just, dude, Ben would just pick on me so much. It was great, right? But he's just such a brute. So Ben like holds me down. He grabs me, he holds me down. And he's like, I'm going to give you cauliflower. He just starts, boom, he just starts headbutting my ear. Just over and over and over again, you know, and then just, yeah, what a legend, right?
Look, let me just tell you.
What a legend.
Right, this is overtime right now. No. Ben is a guy we wrestled with, literally my first friend at Holy Cross.
Yeah.
And I always knew Ben loved you. And the reason why I knew is because he would always single you out.
Yeah, always.
He'd grab Eric and he treated you. And Ben had an older brother, but he didn't have a younger sibling. And I always felt like, I'm like, man, because I could be hard on teammates and tough on people, but I was like, man, why is Ben so damn hard on Eric? And then looking back, it's like, because the dude loved you.
Yeah.
And you know, you sent that text to Dickie that part of the reason why it became what'd you say? It's part of the reason why you got in fighting because of street fighting or something?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
You saw me street. I think it was Ben. I think Ben had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Some perseverance.
I got a great story with that, and you got to post this if you want. So if you remember, there's a confrontation I got in. This guy, it was a bad business exchange. This guy robbed me, right? And I remember I going to you about it, like, man, this guy ripped me off and all this stuff. And then we were at a Mardi Gras parade. And then we saw the guy, right? And you're like, okay, I'll tell you this. So
I remember none.
So I was like, hey, that's the guy that ripped me off. And the guy had like a basketball sweatband. And you go, you let a guy with a sweatband rip you off? And I remember Paul was so mad that I let like some thug rip me off. And I remember you got in his face and like you just like went off on him, like, yeah. But I remember you were like, the guy had a sweatband. You gonna let a guy with a sweatband rip you off like that? And dude, I remember he was just so mad. Just the fact that it was just like just some ghetto guy with the Nike basketball sweatband. Like I remember you just livid. Like I let that happen, you know.
Did we get your money back?
Someone actually did. Someone else, and actually that was one of the first fights I got in. I don't want to post this, but Yeah. Anyway,
No,
but we can. Yeah, but no.
It doesn't matter. You can record it. We don't need to
Yeah,
post
yeah.
it.
No. So what happened was that so that guy, like, I went to go fight him, and I actually got back down. And so I remember, like, Chad Huth and, like, all my friends were there. Like, all right, Eric, you can go fight this kid. We're gonna walk down the street, and you can go fight him. And I walked down the street, and he's like, "What's up?" And I was just like, "I don't want to do this." And I backed down. So then I used to have dreams about this guy, like this guy punking me out, right? Like, oh, I got punked.
Did I not punch this kid in the face?
I don't think you punched. No, I don't think you punched. I think you got in his face or something like that. But so anyway, I used to have dreams about this kid, right? Like, I had dreams that, like, I was trying to punch him and I couldn't punch him, or I was hitting him and he was smiling at me, right? So eventually I saw this guy like 5 months later, and I said, "Come on, let's go." And it was one of the first real fights I got in. I just picked him up and I slammed him over and over again, beat the shit out of him. And I remember I was hitting him, and I remember he looked up and smiled at me, just like in that dream. But anyway, that was the first fight. That was the first time I realized I could fight, you know. But it was just from that guy, like, again, punking me out, and it just lived rent free in my head. And then finally I saw him. I was like, "Ah, that's it." And that was actually one of the first fights I ever got in, you know. But dude, you were mad about the sweatband, dude.
Dude, I remember none of that.
Remember that? Yeah.
Well, dude, I'm so happy you came in.
Yeah.
We got to do this again. We're going to come to Lafayette. We're going to try to fight. I'll be there.
Yeah.
If not, where can you watch it? Can you watch it?
Yeah, it's going to stream.
Yeah.
It's going to stream live. I forget the exact network, but they usually don't announce the stream until, like,
We'll post it.
the day of the fight. They want to sell out the tickets first because they don't want people to say, "Oh, I'm just going to stream it." They want people to go.
Yeah.
So they'll say they won't stream it, and then all of a sudden, stream's going to pop up.
Well, dude, you got us in your corner. I love it.